What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Makina Gaming, the new and improved video game review channel. It's me, your boy Makina here, formerly known as the Video Game Guy, coming to you with yet another video game review. I received some feedback about my former name and how hard it was to find my videos through a generic search on YouTube. So I went ahead and changed it to something that I felt was a little bit more specific and a bit more brandable. The channel name changed, but its purpose has not, and that is to bring you guys entertainment and worthwhile content that'll help you make an informed decision when it comes to purchasing newer released games. Today I'll be sharing my thoughts on Doom Dark Ages. After delivering an amazing FPS experience back in 2020, ID Studios sets out to give us yet another legendary experience. This game has a lot to live up to, and ID Studios knows it. The Doom franchise has been around since the 90s, and it brings with it fans of both the older and newer generation. With each different iteration, we have seen the games get bigger and bolder, and this year's release aims to be no different. Now, before we get started, as always, thank you guys for tuning in and for helping me grow the channel. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button for me if you do enjoy the content. And now, without further ado, I bring to you guys my thoughts on Doom Dark Ages. Check it out. Doom Dark Ages is a game that to me gets a lot of things right, but that falls short in some other areas. For starters, this year's iteration brings with it what makes the franchise legendary in the first place, and that's awesome gameplay. At the very core of it all, anyone who has followed the franchise over the years knows to expect intense gameplay that boasts both blood and gore, swarms of demons everywhere you look, and executions that get your adrenaline pumping as you rip and tear through Hell's Army. By my account, Doom Dark Ages does deliver on most of these fronts, and I am happy to say that throughout my playthrough I did have fun. Tearing through swarms of enemies felt satisfying and made you feel like a real powerhouse on steroids. Doom Dark Ages brings with it a familiar style to the gameplay, but with some new additions, one of which was the newly introduced Shield Saw. This is one of the main new additions to the gameplay this year, and all in all I did enjoy using it. With the shield, they introduced a new parry mechanic that you can take advantage of to repel incoming enemy assaults and to block lethal attacks that would otherwise kill you. You can also throw it at enemies for a more ranged attack, use it to traverse through the world, and you can even lock onto enemies from a larger distance to charge at them for a greater attack. You can definitely tell that ID Studios put a lot of thought into the shield gameplay, and it does show. Aside from the new in-game parry mechanic, they also added different skill trees for your shield, each one bolstering a different ability that helps with crowd control and that adds another element to the gameplay. They also decided to add some skill trees for your melee weapons too, which all grant their own benefits. Most of the combat felt pretty fluid, but there was a trade-off to using the shield. At times, I felt like the movement was pretty restricted and slow. That becomes even more apparent when you see just how much you have to truly dodge and get away from. At times, it kind of feels like you're trying to move with two cement blocks tied to your feet, and it almost feels kind of broken how many enemies the game actually throws at you at once. I get that the game is designed to give you plenty of demons to fight, but in this game, it just feels like some of these sequences were a bit more chaotic and random. Whereas in the last Doom, they felt chaotic but also pretty sequential and purposeful. Like there was more of a point to it all. Here it just feels like some of these battle sequences are disorganized with no real build up to them. There was actually one specific moment throughout my playthrough where I found a collectible and seemingly out of nowhere, I had to go through a gauntlet of some of the game's hardest enemies just to collect this one measly codex. Don't get me wrong though, the gameplay was fun enough to make me want to come back and keep playing more, but at times it just all kind of felt erratic to me. Now, something that I wanted to point out about the gameplay is that to me, throughout my playthrough, I felt like larger scale boss battles were really missing. There were a good variety of enemies in the game to, fight and kill, but even the more challenging ones were introduced pretty early on, which makes the gameplay inevitably feel kind of repetitive as you continue to kill the same recycled demons over and over again, with similar if not repetitive attack patterns. None of the enemies really felt challenging to me, at least not individually, but I will say together it did get to be pretty frustrating at times. What I found to be the most challenging at times was just the sheer volume of attacks that you had to dodge with what I felt was again restricted movement. Countless times I kept dying because it almost felt impossible to dodge all of the incoming attacks that the game was throwing at you at once. I think the gameplay could have been a little bit more enhanced if they just cut back on some of the waves of enemies and instead focused on introducing better individual boss fights. These individual battles could have been a good break in the cycle and could have given the gameplay a bit more direction so that it didn't feel like you were facing the same mindless waves of enemies over and over again. Even so, something that I have to say I really enjoyed about the gameplay were the weapons. Each weapon that you wield in this game is fun to use and brings with it different weapon tiers that you can unlock to get better use out of them. You have some of the classic ones like your pump action shotgun and rocket launcher, but also some new creative ones that make your onslaught that much more appealing. The cool thing is that as you progress through the game, you essentially get an enhanced version of some of the same weapons. This, paired with the weapon tiers that I mentioned to you earlier, helps vary the gameplay up and keep things pretty creative and fun. Upgrades to your weapons are made available through in-game currency that you'll receive by finding different collectibles and gold spread throughout each level. These weapon tiers give the player flexibility to choose how they want to use their weapons, as it'll offer different upgrades that you'll get to choose from. Each upgrade serves its own purpose, and it's up to you how you choose to use them. Although you don't get a ton of upgrades, and although this isn't necessarily new to the Doom franchise, the fact that they actually have this system in place offers the player some variety and makes the gameplay that much more fun. Now, what's a good FPS without some beautiful visuals and graphics? The Doom world is one riddled with bloodshed and war, and that's all represented really well in this game. The backgrounds of the different levels really magnify what this world is truly about. In the distance, you'll see different factions engaged in aerial warfare, you'll see and hear explosions, and you'll see titans fighting one another. Visually speaking, I think the game looked pretty good and was pretty detailed. What it lacked to me, however, was intensity, and the main reason for that to me, I think, was the soundtrack. I think that the soundtrack in this game was definitely weaker than in Doom Eternal, and the game does suffer a bit because of that. It has a decent soundtrack and ample sound effects, but the standard was set pretty high by ID Studios in the last game, and I just don't feel like this game delivered that punch to the gut, adrenaline-inducing soundtrack that intensifies battles or the world around it. Even the executions felt like a little bit of a downgrade in this game. You had some cool ones that showed some enemies getting split in half by your shield saw and others getting their hearts ripped out, but most of them just kind of felt a little lackluster. Delivering a punch or a kick as an execution wasn't as satisfying, especially when being done to a more challenging enemy. The visuals within the world were still pretty cool though and immersive, and I did like the overall designs with the exception of one or two that were somewhat confusing to navigate through. I don't necessarily know how you would play through the game, but while I was playing, I actually wanted to find all the collectibles that were spread throughout each level, and overall, I had no issues traversing through the different worlds to find them. I also liked the challenge of having to figure out how to access different areas to get the collectible it was you were seeking. The different puzzles were challenging, but solving them felt pretty satisfying. Just to be clear though, this does slow down the pace pretty dramatically, and you obviously don't have to play the game this way. But for all of my completionists out there, this game does give you incentive to go back and play the different levels again if you feel like you wanted to 100% everything. This game also introduced a couple of levels that really changed the Doom formula up a bit. In a couple of the levels, the game introduces you to Sarat, which is a giant mechanized dragon that you can use as a mount. While playing through these levels, you'll find yourself fighting demon titans, shooting down ships, and exploring different areas to see what collectibles are available. These sections were a good switch up in the gameplay and offered the player something innovative that they've never seen in any other Doom game. These levels were broken down into different sections that would be otherwise inaccessible if not for your dragon, so it was a good way to introduce them. The game also introduces different levels where you get to use a giant mech to fight different demon titans. The gameplay in the giant mech is oversimplified in my opinion and pretty easy to understand, and I did enjoy playing through these levels for the most part, but to me it felt like they were more for show, as if the spectacle of it all was the focus and not really the in-depth mechanics of the actual combat. Still, what they offered was pretty awesome to see visually and most importantly innovative. In a future game it would be really cool to see these same additions but with a little bit more intricacy and better integration.
Everything will be destroyed, including your Sentinel energy reserves.
Launch the Slayer.
Now we've spoken about the world, we've spoken about the level design, and we've spoken about the gameplay. That leaves us with the narrative. Now the narrative in Doom has always been a little unclear to me, but overall cool in concept. I mean, you're an overpowered demon slayer. Doesn't get much cooler than that. But to be a little bit more specific, Doom Dark Ages offers the players a narrative that takes place before the events of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. It features the Makers, which are the godlike beings that you read about in the lore, and the Sentinels, which are tech-heavy knights who wage war against Hell's army. Oh, and it also introduces Azrak, who is the leader of Hell's legions in this game. In this game, the Slayer is under the control of the Makers and is a weapon meant to be used for their will. These godlike beings look to aid the Sentinels in their war against Hell's forces, and they send out the Demon Slayer anytime they need an equalizer to turn the tides of battle. Azrak is looking for what's called the Heart of Ardent, which is an ancient artifact of immense power that is said to contain the soul of the last known wraith. With it, he wants to rule over Hell and win the war against the Sentinels. Without spoiling what happens, I'll say that the story is pretty straightforward and does contain a lot of lore that newer fans might really get into. The narrative in the game isn't all that complicated to follow, but if you want to dive deeper into the world and its characters, I suggest that you read all the lore within this game and out of it, because it can get complicated. I do think the game needed a prologue just to bring players up to date with everything, and if you're new to the franchise, you might not understand the overarching narrative, but at least the in-game one is pretty simple to track. Basically, kill lots of demons and stop the bad guy from getting his hands on an ancient artifact that can make him all powerful. I also gotta say I do like the antagonist in this game. Although he was a simple character to understand, his appearance alone made me perceive him to be a real threat, and the voice acting for the character was top notch.
It is not this witch who is forced onto the battlefield against the Slayer. All the power of Hell cowering before one man.
Doomguy, on the other hand, never really says anything, but yet somehow his aura and action do all the talking for him. Every level you go through is a constant reminder that you are a weapon with one goal and one goal only: to slay as many demons as possible and to keep Hell's forces at bay, and I love it. They stay true to his character and personify his ruthlessness through action, which as a core gamer I can appreciate. So where does this leave us? Well, I can personally tell you that if you're looking for a video game that has some old school vintage appeal to it, Doom Dark Ages is the game for you. It's got a simple progression system to understand, fun weapons to use and cycle through, different weapon tiers that vary up your playthrough, cool sound effects, and core gameplay that can feel addicting at times. The concept of the story is simple to understand, but there's a lot of depth here if you feel like diving deeper into the lore. Fighting against gauntlets of demons and seeing all the blood and gore as you rip and tear through enemies is fun and reminds me of older style games. For those reasons, Doom Dark Ages gets an 8 out of 10. It's a vintage game with a modern take that has a lot of appeal to it. It gets major props from me for being innovative in certain areas and for staying true to what makes the franchise great in the first place. It definitely did have its downsides and a couple of downgrades in certain aspects, but still, overall, it was a fun game that I would recommend to anyone. Now I want to hear from you guys. If you've played the game, what did you guys think of it? How did you feel about this game compared to the last one? And what did you guys think about my verdict? Leave your thoughts and your comments in the comment section below. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate all the support. If you've enjoyed the review, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, be on the lookout for another Makina Gaming review. Peace.